Zone.
Welcome to an episode of Phantom Zoned. That's Phantom Zoned. At the very end, we want to make sure that D is there. It's important. It's very important. But welcome to Phantom Zoned, the podcast where we dredge the lakes of hell in search of the worst that the cinematic world has to offer. After watching a film, we put it on trial for its various crimes against humanity. If a film should be found not guilty, it's allowed to frolic freely in the fields of life for everyone to enjoy for the rest of time. But if a film is found guilty, it is jettisoned far, far, far into the deep, 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 dark recesses of space, a phantom zone, if you will. I'm your host, Adrian Torres, and joining me as always and forevermore is the man I went to jail for a year for, my good, severely concussed, stuttering junkie co-host, Mr. Scott Daly. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm doing so well. You're too kind. The kindest introduction I've ever received. You know, I had completely forgotten what the intro of this podcast was because it's been so many years, and hearing you read it back, like it all just came rushing back to me. Everything that we did I don't even remember how many episodes we did, but it was like 16 years ago, it feels like, and it's all come back. It's all come back.
It was, I believe, 42 episodes we did.
Did we really do 42? Oh
yeah,
my God.
42 episodes. That they're all in the Doof Media archives. Mm-hmm. If you haven't gotten a chance to listen to any of them yet, the straw that broke the camel's back was indeed Heart Beeps. We had planned to record an episode on that. We both watched the movie, and then Scott said nope.
I mean, it's funny because we had talked before we watched Heart Beeps. We were like, all right, we're going to do one final episode. Mm-hmm. We're going to make it Heart Beeps. We both went out and watched it. And then I think something came up and we couldn't do the recording session. And then we just never spoke again for 5 years.
For three and a half years ago. It was February of 2018 was the last time we had an episode that came out. So wow. if you're listening to this for the first time, welcome in. If you're coming back saying, what the hell? Why are you guys doing this? Well, let's put it this way. Everybody's getting a revival nowadays.
It's true.
And Scott decided that the other podcast that he was doing at the time was getting, really big. I don't blame him at all. I don't have any hard feelings. His show is getting really popular and he was trying to do a couple other things and didn't have the time. So I totally understood. Hey, you pursue this. I went on and deepened myself more into writing and starting a podcast, which has been on hiatus, but it's going to come back. We're going to talk about that later. But Scott decided now, at the point that he's had a brand new child just a couple months ago, that this was the perfect time to bring back the show.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the thing. I missed talking with you. I missed talking about shitty movies with you. And I never disliked recording the show. I just got too busy. And so I figured, what is a better time to put one more thing on my plate than when I'm taking care of a baby? So, it's I don't make good decisions, but here we are in a whole podcast about us making bad decisions. So it's really fitting.
Yeah, no, it's not like last year there was a pandemic while everybody was, stuck at home for a long period of time. That would have been the natural progression of when to bring something back.
Oh, yeah, that would have made sense. You know what I did? Instead, I just played every single Final Fantasy game. That's what I did in my unemployment in 2020. So that's the decision I made.
Bad decisions all around and bad decisions continuing. Now, again, for you people who might be coming in for the first time and you're like, okay, so what is this podcast about? I did use very colorful language at the beginning there, which may have thrown you off, but this is a podcast about two guys. Usually we have guests who are on here. We're probably going to have guests in the future. We're getting back in the swing of things. So we're going to see what's happened. I've had a couple people who heard this was coming back, who wanted to subject themselves to everything that goes on in this. But this is a podcast where we're watching bad movies. And then, as I said, we're putting them on trial and we vote guilty or not guilty at the very end of it. I mean, that's the basic tenets. And of course, you're saying to yourself, well, yeah, but there's something like, how did this get made that exists? Well, I understand, but we're not as popular as them.
They are rank amateurs compared to us.
That's not what I said. That was Scott Daly who said that. You can send everything directed towards him, not to me for that.
Scott at doofmedia.com if you want to Let me know.
just do it. Just put in Scott Daly anywhere. It doesn't matter who the Scott Daly is. Send your feedback and annoyance to them. They'll probably appreciate it.
There's a professional football player that's a Scott Daly. So yeah, let him know what you think
Yeah,
about
yeah.
bad movies.
Just make him angry, just send him all the information about these movies and your complaints. He won't understand, and maybe he'll respond to you. There you go. I know there's plenty of people, who want to sink different types of attention nowadays. So maybe that'll be the outlet for them. But on that show, they do, I'd say, more well-known movies. Yeah, there's some that they do, and they're like Abraxas and stuff, but usually it's more well-known or larger budgeted films. And then there might be people out there who mention something like Red Letter Media's Best of the Worst. I'll come out on record and you can stop listening after this. I'm not really a big fan of that. Also, that's also a video that's on YouTube. That's different from a podcast. You have to listen to us. You can't watch us go out of our way to completely destroy something just because that's in our nature, the thing that we're supposed to do. For the movies that we're choosing movies that are some of the worst, or films that you have absolutely never heard of, and possibly the people who made the movie completely forgot about making at one point or another.
I hope so.
In some cases, that's probably the best for everybody. But we're looking at these hoping that they're good films, or at least, seeing a film that deserves a second chance and deserves people to watch it, either because it's a legitimately good film or it does fall into the category of so bad it's good. We don't really want to find movies that are constantly we're saying is guilty. We want to be surprised, but we literally do drag the lakes of hell, to try to find the worst that you can find. I mean, when we were originally doing the show, we were looking at, the bottom IMDb ones, or we would be looking at movies that when you're searching those bad movies on IMDb, then suggests you another film that has no rating out there and is almost impossible to find. But like I said, we did this show, the last episode in 2018. And when we were finding some of these movies, they were on stuff like Vudu because they had the free section with ads at the time. And not a lot of places were doing that. And now you've got all these other sites. And like the movie that we saw today, which is called Under the Gun from 1995. Want to make sure that we're saying that it's from 1995 because Scott got confused and almost watched a different movie, but we saw this on Tubi. And Tubi wasn't exactly around at that time. And Tubi is something that I think is going to help give us life. There's going to be movies that we otherwise might not be able to find.
Yeah, it's a service that's made for this show. Like
exactly.
100%.
And the same with all the lesser stuff that's on Amazon Prime Video that you've never heard of. That's the type of stuff that we're going, oh, look at these beautiful, wonderful cherries. Occasionally we might still have to go to YouTube, but we'll let you guys know if that happens.
Indeed. I my gosh. When are we almost ready to start talking about this movie? Because I have so many words for this movie.
I don't know. I feel a little bit nervous to do so because this movie is, I don't exactly know how to put it. When you go on to Tubi, it has a little thing right underneath the title of the film that says watch trailer. When you click on that, you don't get a trailer. You get about 2.5 minute scene from the movie.
Oh, of course.
And that was enough to sell me on, oh, we have to watch this film. At the same time, it's not indicative of anything else that happens in the movie. Now, something we always like to do is to look at the synopsis of this film. So like I said, this movie's from 1995, Under the Gun. If you're in a foreign country and listening to this, it might be Under Iron Fist.
What?
Yep. I don't know why, but in certain countries, it's Iron Fist. And they have one of the secondary characters on the lead cover of the box. And the other one has a hand that has tape on it like somebody's in a boxing match.
Oh, yeah, because boxing has a lot to do with this movie.
It has everything to do with this film. Now, I wanted to start with Tubi since that's where we saw, the movie. And so their synopsis is, after a decade in debt, a club owner shuts his doors, but a long list of creditors, including drug dealers, cops, and hitmen, still want to collect.
No. That is not what this movie's about.
Okay, we tried. Tubi had it out there. We wanted to give it the all college try. So here, Scott, we'll go back to our friend, the person who's never treated us wrong, in any of the previous 42 episodes that we've done this. Good old IMDb, which says a debt-ridden nightclub owner has to take on Italian and Asian mobsters, corrupt police officers, and an angry pimp that he threw out of the club to try to keep his club in business.
No, that's not right either. I mean, it's closer.
If you put them together, you basically get the movie, right?
Oh, kind of. He's not trying to keep his club in business. He's trying to rip people off and run away.
Now, Scott, I think it's important to let everybody know that this film takes place in Australia, right?
Okay, does it? So here's the confusion.
Hold on. I think I know where you're going to go. So that was going to be my next question, is that when you think of Australia, what's the first thing you think of?
Adrian, I'd have to say hockey.
That's what I was going to say too, yeah. Especially with the classic team, the Boilermakers. Because as we learn in the first 15 seconds of the film via voiceover, because this is a movie that is not a noir, it's not a whodunit film, but has voiceover that makes you think that this is a gumshoe that's talking the whole time. Yeah. In the first 15 seconds, you learn that our main character was a hockey player. Not only was he a hockey player, he was one of the best hockey players in all of Australia, took them to the championship. And then the next season, a new guy came onto the team who I think he says was like, just a beautiful man that when he saw him, he knew he was going to be a legend, partly because his name is Harry Hardaway. And what we find out is that Harry also had a problem, is that he was a junkie. And there was a giant probe into him being a junkie that somehow ended up with there being an indictment where our main character, Frank Torrance, was called to the stand and decided that he wasn't going to rat on the guy that everybody already knew was a junkie. So he ended up getting thrown in jail for a year, which cost him the rest of his career and somehow turned him into the worst version of Sam from Cheers. Because he, at some point in his career, bought a nightclub in a derelict part of town.
Yeah. A nightclub that is both open and under construction simultaneously.
It has a giant banner over it. Like this place looks like a bank from the outside, which doesn't really work with the dimensions that you see inside, except for the fact that Frank's office is a bank safe.
A bank safe that people continuously get in anyway. It's the most confusing thing in the world. It's got like a giant keypad on it and a giant metal door, and yet he walks into his office and there's people waiting for him every time.
The very first time you see him run to the office, he has a little card that he puts in the keypad. At no other point does he actually put it in until like the very end of the movie. But an hour's gone by and he ends up saying to somebody, hey, I need my key for the office, even though all these other characters have walked in and out of the office throughout the movie.
Yeah, the corrupt police detective is just sitting in his chair. And I'm like, how did you get in there?
Scott, I'm very sorry, and I'm going to have to correct you right there. What? That gentleman is not a police detective.
Oh, I'm sorry. He was on suspension. You're right.
No. He's a DEA agent.
Oh. Well, is he? I don't know.
We think that he is. So, okay.
So the DEA is an American agency. I mean, there could be an Australian DEA, but they probably call us something else.
We'll get into this. So let's set up the movie, at least the very beginnings of the movie. So we have Frank Torrance, ex-great hockey player who owns a nightclub that I'm now forgetting.
I think it was called the Boilermaker. I think
the Boilermaker. Okay, yeah. Because the team he was on was the Boilermakers. That makes sense. They only mention it like at the very first 5 seconds of the film, and then never mention it again.
It's not important.
So he lost his career. Basically, his career went in shambles after he was thrown in jail for a year. Apparently, that was around a decade ago. So he has been working only as a nightclub owner for the past 10 years. Yes. And Frank has decided that he is done with it. He wants to get the hell out of Australia and go to Mexico, of all places.
Yeah. So his plan here, it's a many faceted plan. It's very complicated. step one is he has artificially inflated the value of his club. And so he's going to sell it to a guy at way more than it's worth. Like $1.3 million, I think is the plan, right?
Yes, just over $1 million to Mr. Lin Pao,
Yes.
an Asian businessman in Australia.
Yeah. The second part of his plan, because the $1 million was not enough for him, is he's facilitating a drug transaction between the Italian mob and the triads.
Correct.
And he's going to rip them off too by taking the drugs, but then saying they're not good enough and keeping the money and then running with the money. I don't know why he's doing this part of the plan.
For the $450,000, he said. Because that was the plus side. So again, ladies and gentlemen, this is your hero of the movie. This is the person you're rooting for, is actively cooking his books just because he wants to get out of town, and then facilitating a drug deal between the triads and the mob, who, how he knows them, we're never told.
Doesn't matter.
And that he's going to rip off the triads to steal the money from the mob so that he can go to Mexico.
I think it helps if you just pretend that this movie is just Casablanca and this is Rick and he's at Rick's and he's just trying to survive, man. He's just trying to survive. And then who walks in his door? The detective lady friend who I don't know. The metaphor collapses there, but
I think the metaphor collapses like 30 seconds into the movie when you have the drug deal right away with the triads and, you know, him trying the coke and then knocking it all over the place and punching some people so that the deal goes bad. And then getting on the phone with the Italian mob, who the guy's on oxygen for whatever reason. And then you've got a guy who's a sketch comedy level of what a mobster is, what a Goomba is, because he's in a leather jacket, then has a red shirt with the collar that's popped over it, and is literally chomping on a cigarette.
Yes.
Like, it's just dangling. It's not lit. It's dangling from his lip in like the place of a toothpick. And there's at least like 3-4 scenes where he just has it just dangling out the side of his mouth.
And this is the problem with Frank Torrance and this movie generally, is that like he's sitting here throughout the whole movie getting more and more exasperated, like, oh, why is this happening tonight? Why tonight of all nights? And I'm like, because you did this, Frank. Like, his plan with the triads was to reject the cocaine, and instead of just saying, no, this isn't good enough, take it away and come tomorrow with better cocaine, he punches them and kicks the cocaine into the air. And it's like, that's supposedly $450,000 worth of drugs you just destroyed there. Of course they're going to come back tonight and try to kill you. Like, what are you thinking, Frank?
He's not thinking, because the first thought that he has after he, you know, kicks all the coke in the air is to ask who? His good junkie friend, Harry Hardaway, who caused him to go to jail. That he decided, you know what, I should have you as security. And on this night, my junkie friend, I'm going to have you clean up all the coke or heroin or whatever it was. You know, I'm going to have you, the person with a known drug habit, to be the person who's in charge of cleaning up and then storing the drugs.
Yeah. Which the drugs are like sitting out in the open in the middle of a club that is open, that there are customers in the club, and he's like walking around. It's like, this is all the heroin I was able to pick up from your drug deal.
And it's only like a quarter of what they had. The rest of it's just evaporated.
He definitely just used it all. Like, he definitely just used it all, which is, I mean, we have to talk about this character who plays Harry Hardaway. It's an actor named Peter Lindsay, I guess. I've never heard of this guy.
Okay. Here's the interesting thing. So first of all, if you guys are searching for this movie, there might be a person who's in the cast. The lead person, actually, who plays Frank, is played by Richard Norton. Now, for some people, you're going to have to be in like a big action fan, from a direct-to-video action fan from like the late 80s to early 90s to know who he is. This is a guy who very much was in the martial arts scene when it came to films. He was teamed up with Cynthia Rothrock several times in China O'Brien 1 and 2, Rage and Honor 1 and 2. But he was also known a couple years after this and before this as being a bad guy in a couple Jackie Chan movies. One of which was, of course, City Hunter, and the other one was Mr. Nice Guy. He's actually the first character that you see in Mr. Nice Guy. He is the bad uh, Australian / Italian mob guy who beats up a woman and tries to drown her in a pool and then has her buried alive by a giant bulldozer in that movie.
Man, I'm looking at his IMDb right now. He's like a big steel stunt dude. He's been
Yeah.
like stunt coordinator for like X-Men, Dark Phoenix, Suicide Squad, Triple Frontier, Mad Max Fury Road,
Yep.
The Amazing Spider-Man, Green Hornet. Jeez, this is
Jim Cotta.
Oh yeah, yeah, Jim Cotta, yeah.
He did Jim Cotta. And now, one of the ones that we mentioned in there was Fury Road. You would actually see him for about 2 seconds in the film because there's a scene in the back of one of the trucks that Charlize Theron's Furiosa is fighting a guy who's bald and like the top half of his head is painted black and ends up getting thrown off the side of the car. And that's actually him.
Wow.
Who's fighting her because he was one of the main coordinators on there. Like he was on an episode of Spartacus years ago too. So like this guy's very much tied into that. Now the other gentleman that you mentioned, Peter Lindsay, has 2 different names on IMDb. To find this movie, you're going to see Peter Lindsay EY, but if you put in Peter Lindsay AY, you're going to see the exact same guy with a couple other credits. Now, the movie that you're going to see one of the credits that he has is Mr. Nice Guy. And that's because after that opening scene, you then see Jackie Chan, and then it goes back to the bad guy's plot that's going on that Jackie Chan ends up getting wound up in. And it deals with a drug deal that's going to be going on between 2 gentlemen, one of which is Richard Norris, who is Frank in this film. And the other guy, who's the head of the rival gang, is the guy who plays Harry.
So it all comes together.
It's 2 years after this. And the reason I mention this is Scott had something that stuck out to him and I think would stick out to anybody if they watch this movie.
I don't understand what he's doing with his performance. He seems to be Have you seen Death to Smoochie?
Yeah.
this is in Death to Smoochie, they have that friend, the boxer friend, played by Michael Rispoli, who's friends with Smoochie and friends with Edward Norton's character, and he's a very famous boxer that had got hit in the head too many times.
He's punch drunk.
Yeah, he's constantly punch drunk. It feels like that's what this actor is doing. It really reminded me of that Death to Smoochie performance where it's just kind of over the top and weird.
Yes.
And I didn't understand any of it.
It seems like he either has some type of brain damage from the drugs that he did or from being a hockey player, even though Frank doesn't have any signs of being severely concussed at all. But the very first moment that you see him, he comes up and he goes, is it true, Frank?
Uh-huh.
Are you leaving? Are you leaving? And like you're waiting for him to be like, tell me about the rabbits, George. Tell me about the rabbits. And like it's definitely a choice because the guy is completely different in Mr. Nice Guy. And like the crazy thing is, if you have access to Mr. Nice Guy, go and watch like the first couple scenes with Richard Norton or like this meeting of the 2 characters in there, and then watch the trailer for this film. They are so much more engaged and energized and fucking alive. And in like the just couple minutes, like the guy who plays Harry, Peter, he comes sliding on the stage directly in front of Richard Norton's Giancarlo character of that movie. And he's got shades on and a Hawaiian shirt. And he's got a giant machete. And he goes, you don't want to get too close to me, man, because I'm really good at cutting things. And you're like, okay. And like, it's completely different than in here. So what he's doing in this movie, the character of Harry Hardaway, is a choice.
Wow. It's a terrible one. It's a terrible choice. It's super distracting. Like I was honestly like feeling like, is there something wrong with his actor? Like that's where I was going with it. It's just like, but if you're telling me no, then it's a wild choice to be making. I don't understand. It's one of those things where you like think maybe he was like at home trying to like find his character, and he said, "Oh, he's gonna be a guy that's gotten hit on the head too many times, and I'm gonna portray that with like the least kind stutter ever." And it's just, it's bad. It's bad. And like the problem is, the relationship between these two men is supposed to kind of be what the whole emotional through line of the movie is. Like it's supposed to be their friendship and the betrayal that occurs between the two of them. It's just, my God, my God.
Well, I mean, there's so many choices in here because while we do know that Frank is a hockey player and a nightclub owner, which the nightclub is a bar that then has a dance floor that looks like it's in like a sunken MMA pit.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the way this place is lit, it's like it's really dark, and it's all lit by spotlights from above, so like you can barely ever see the walls of it, so it just feels like you're just in this like liminal space between worlds. It's such a weird shot set. It's so weird.
The most color that shows up in any of these scenes is the yellow safety color from the ladders that are around from the renovations that they're doing on what?
I don't know. Like what have they improved in the thing? Like that's the weird thing is like we definitely see ladders, which I think was
Yes.
just like an excuse to have all the crew equipment around that they didn't feel like moving.
Mhm.
But it doesn't appear that they're actually working on anything, and I
No.
don't understand any of that.
One of the closing moments of the movie has a construction worker come over, put his arm around Frank and say, "We're done. We're done, Frank." And like that's it. And like Frank, his face is completely blank, so you don't know if like he's impressed by the work. But going back, we know he's a hockey player. We know he's a nightclub owner because everything tells us that. And VO, what we're not told in voiceover that he's also apparently a karate master?
Oh
Question
yeah,
mark.
he's the best karate master. He's the king karate master. He's so good at all the fighting. He fights everyone. He punches everyone in this movie.
Oh, and he also does. What would you call it if you were to kick someone and make a roundabout motion of that?
I would call that like a kicky and a spinny flippy kicky, something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, that sounds about right.
Mm-hmm.
One of Scott's favorite terms, which directly after he does that one of the first times, something that made me miss the Phantom Zone days so much was because we don't make it 15 minutes into the movie before we have somebody get punched in the groin.
Nut shot, the old Phantom Zone standard. Did you? So okay, this movie starts on a voiceover, like you said, and then we go into the club, and then he does this weird thing where we have one of those like 20-second vignettes that are montages, and it's just scenes
Yes.
from later in the movie.
Hi,
Like
I'm Frank. You're probably wondering how I got into this situation.
it's so nonsense. Like in the first 20 seconds of the movie, he gets kicked in the nuts, and I was like, wait, what? And then I realized when the scene plays again later, it's like, oh, those were scenes from later in the movie. I
Yeah,
get
because
it now.
he even says I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the best way to break down this movie. If you're trying to find out like what to compare it to, there's not a lot of really good things, but the best thing that I can say is imagine if there was a movie that was part Sam Spade Caper, part After Hours, and part Tommy Wiseau's The Room, with a sprinkling of Jackie Chan's sloppy thirds. That's basically Under the Gun.
See, here's
But it's
what
a
I thought
lot
it
more
was.
boring than that sounds.
Yeah, what I compared it to, and this is going to be really out there, a classic nonsense Scott tangent, but you know, sitcoms that have
I
those
know of
moments.
them. I've heard
Well,
of them.
well, every sitcom always has that episode where like the main character schedules two dates at the same time, and then it's like having to kind of run around frantically trying to control everything and not let the two dates notice each other. That's
Yeah.
basically what this movie is, except guns instead of like flowers or something. Like it's just him frantically running around. Like it's just a series of escalating consequences of his own actions. Like
Yes.
this is not something that's happening to him. This is something that he is doing. Like why is everything going wrong? Well, because you're trying to rip off literally everyone, Frank. That's why everything's going wrong. And it's just it's this really interesting escalation of all those stuff. And he's getting everyone around him killed or maimed, and it's just wild.
Well, it's also wild because technically the person that he's on the date with is Lin Pao, because he shows up unexpectedly with his accountant who
Yeah.
wants to take a look at everything. He shows up to the club and is constantly being told, "Hey, just stay here for 5 more minutes. Just stay here for 5 more minutes. I've got somebody," and they're constantly like, "Yeah, another hour." He hires a hooker at one point just to hang out with him,
Yeah.
to so he can stay in there, which of course leads to one of the greatest characters in the movie, which is the pimp. That at first Frank's like, "Hey, I'm going to give you some money," and then it's like, "You know what? You're kind of being an ass. I don't want you to be here anymore." And throws him out, in which we get the first of like 7 different instances of people pulling out butterfly knives, which
Yes.
apparently the prop director like saw that there was a fire sale on butterfly knives, because not only does every character have a butterfly knife in the movie, but they're all the same model and color.
And they're all like really good at them. Like if you put a butterfly knife in my hand, I'd like try to do that thing, but I'd probably fuck it up. But every single one of these guys is like, and then just stabs people.
Well, say for the pimp, of course, who the most notable thing about the pimp, besides constantly getting thrown out of the club, is the terrible wig that he has on his head.
Yeah, I don't. It doesn't. It's not every day that a movie makes me feel bad for a pimp, but I kind of feel bad for this guy who he's just trying to do his job. He's just wanting some money, and then he gets thrown out of the bar, and then he just keeps trying to come back.
Scott, this pimp is effective as like a second tier Mario villain.
Well, I mean, I like Mario.
Well, yeah, you like Mario, but you don't like his villains. I mean,
everybody loves King Koopa.
But imagine if Bowser basically, it's like, "Oh, I can't defeat him. I got thrown out of here. I'm just going to continually hire people to come and fight in my stead." And
imagine how much money he spent hiring.
Exactly. Like he spent all the money because he just keeps on going, and he's like, "Okay, this didn't work. Let me find a bigger person." Now, what's interesting about all this that we're mentioning, and the fact that this is technically a fight movie, is so you've got Lin Pao, who's a small little Asian businessman. You've got the pimp, who's small and ineffective, and then you've got oh god, I can't remember his name, Detective Dexter, who we'll get to in just a mention.
Eye patch
or
guy.
Just a mention. Yes. Well, yes, he has an eye patch, but he basically looks like the person who was Dennis Hopper's stand-in in Waterworld.
Yes, 100%. I was immediately like Waterworld. I pointed at the screen like in a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and said Waterworld.
But the villains are so ineffective in this movie that they have to bend over backwards in order to create situations in which there would be fights.
Yeah, I mean, there's parts of this movie that feel to me kind of like a Breen-esque fantasy for Richard Norton, because like he's just the best at everything he does, and like he constantly gets these situations, then gets to get out of them, and then like all these women are throwing themselves at him, and like it feels like, I know he didn't write or direct it, but it feels like a movie that is made for him to just make himself feel great.
Well, and see Richard Norton had been, like I said, around for a while, and he was established, but he wasn't really somebody who had like this type of role or importance put on his shoulder, and that's why if you look behind the scenes on this, you start to get a little picture into what was going on. So you have these. This was basically completely, financed independently, mostly through 2 guys, Tom Kuhn and Fred Weintraub. They were the ones who, produced it for the most part. You had Richard Norton put in some money, and the director, who was also the writer, put in some money. But those were the 2 main guys. And the majority of the film was shot at a deserted power station next to a major river in Melbourne. So like that's the whole
Yeah,
reason why they have the nightclub and they're not really going out anywhere else, say for like the alleyway behind the nightclub. And
which
that's
is
why
presumably the alleyway behind the power station, right?
exactly, exactly. Now those two guys that I mentioned, Tom Kuhn and Fred Weinstrom, have some interesting credits. The main thing that you notice from Tom Kuhn just a couple years before this movie comes out is that he was one of the main producers on Return of Swamp Thing, whereas Fred Weintraub is somebody who has a lot of credits and clearly made his money off like different exploitation markets, whether it be like the action exploitation films or black exploitation films, because of the fact that you have titles like Enter the Dragon, Truck Turner, Black Belt Jones, and Battle at Creek Brawl. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that show up on there. So like that's clearly where his money is coming from, and they're trying to go in that direction. You know, one of them's coming from kind of a campy background, and the other one's coming from, you know, this action exploitation background. Now, the director who also wrote the movie, this was his first film. You can tell that in every, you know, moment of it.
Oh yeah, because it looks terribly. It the lighting is terrible. Hey,
Yes.
did you hear the mix of this movie in which all the sound effects are mixed like way too high, and every time someone walks, it's louder than anything else?
Well, I mean that's very indicative of films that were being shot in the area for that time, especially a movie that's like this. For any of those like direct to video action films, it's something that you're definitely going to get a
Yeah,
lot in that. And like lots of the people who were working on the crew for this were people who were working on, you know, Jackie Chan movies or other action films that were being filmed in the area at the time. So they were just all kind of hold overs for that. And that's why it seems very cobbled together. Like the guy who wrote and directed this movie, he's only done a couple other films that he's written and directed, and they all seem like they're of like the same quality of this. But if you go into IMDb and you put in his name, which is Matthew George, which is like, you know, the two most blandest first names that you could possibly put together at any point, you put that in, when you go to his IMDb bio, it starts out in 2013. Like it mentions, oh yeah, he put together this or this, you know, like production company and finance company in 2013. Um, and then they end up mentioning this film like on like the third paragraph. They mentioned, you know, he also has experiences as a director with the rip roaring Under the Gun. I'm like, oh, okay. I think you may have written this, but he's primarily become a producer in the last several years.
a
Like,
successful producer.
well, I mean, if we're looking at the films, it's like here's one that's good, and here's one maybe we shouldn't talk about it. Here's one that's good. Here's one we shouldn't talk about it, because he did A Private War and Wind River would
Yeah,
be the two positive ones. But then
I
he
feel like
also
if you
did
produce a Taylor Sheridan film, like
yes.
you're successful. Like that's if I have to have a gauge for what is and isn't successful, I think producing a Taylor Sheridan film
Yeah,
wins.
but then he's also the person who produced the LBJ Rob Reiner film
Sure, which
and
I never even saw that one.
The Secret movie that they made, as in the movie that's based off the book The Secret with
Oh,
Katie Holmes.
I didn't know that they made that movie.
Oh yes, yeah, it's that's very much a thing.
Wow, Katie Holmes and Josh Lucas. Look at this. Dare to Dream, The Secret.
Exactly, exactly. It's but yeah, that's what he was doing. Whereas this is probably as far as you could get from that movie, like because the film's just straight up nonsense at points. We've mentioned Detective Dexter several different times, and that's because he just continually kind of pops up throughout the movie. His reason for being in the film is he supposedly wants to bust um, Frank for doing a drug deal. Now, it makes him seem like he's been on him for a long time, because it turns out that Dexter is the guy who busted Frank back in the hockey days and
Yeah,
was trying to get him to turn on Harry, and has always just had a hard on for the fact that he wouldn't turn in Hardaway. But it doesn't make sense why he's like this gung ho on trying to destroy him. He's called Detective Dexter, but the people that he's constantly seen working with for the entire movie is the DEA. The DEA also knows the local police officer, Lisa, who's a good friend of Frank's, and tells him, you know, hey, just let me know what's going on because I want to be on your side. I want to help you out, and gets into, a couple of fights, helping him out, and then just gets basically executed and shot in the chest halfway through the movie.
Yeah, a thing that he discovers off screen, and we hear him say later, like he killed her, and like, okay,
He finds out in the final 2 minutes of the movie. But okay, so we mentioned the DEA. I looked online. I wanted to find out because I was like, the DEA working with the cops in Australia.
doesn't
That's
happen.
that's weird. Now, yes, the DEA is technically strictly an American institution, but it turns out that the DEA has a country office in Canberra and a resident office in Sydney. The AFP, which is the Australian Federal Police, does cooperate with international agencies like the DEA, but it seems weird that
Yeah,
they'd be coming from Sydney to Melbourne just to help out on this case.
yeah. Especially since they witness the detective murder a police officer and
Yes.
don't do anything about it.
Oh, they all know karate too. They all
Yeah,
know karate.
I mean, this is the weird thing about this movie is like it's trying very hard to paint this guy as a crooked evil cop, right? Like he's got the eye patch, he's Dennis Hopper, he's evil. Um, and while it is true that he is corrupt and he murders someone and he's really just hounding Frank for the money, he's also like right about him. Like he's completely right about him. He's involved in drug trafficking. That's what he's doing. And he was even right about Harry back in the early days of their hockey career. He was addicted to drugs. He was using drugs. So
Yes.
like I don't know. It's just weird that it's not like they went he took down Harry and Frank for non-legit reasons. Like they're doing all the bad things they're being accused of doing.
Which is weird because the movie clearly has you thinking, oh, well, there's somebody who's working on the inside. That's the only way that Dexter could be getting this information. And for part of the movie, you're convinced that it's going to be this guy, Tom, who just happens to show up this one bad night, who I believe is American and one of the only Americans in the movie, even though his dad was in prison with Frank. And so that's why he showed up to try to be the muscle and like ends up being comic relief with Harry for like half the film because they're butting heads. And partway through the film, they have him, going through Frank's place and stuff. And you're like, oh, clearly he is the turncoat. And then 2 seconds later, he's on the phone with the Italian mob. And he's like, no, I didn't find anything at all. It's not him. And you're like, wait, so you're not the turncoat? And then 15 minutes later, he goes, no, Frank, I roll with the punches. I adapt to the situation. And you're like, what?
He prints off a copy of Frank's travel itinerary and then calls the Italians just to lie to them. And I'm like, why did you print off that thing? Like
he crumples it up.
He crumples it up and throws it away.
And he didn't print it off. He makes a copy of it.
I'm sorry. That's even worse.
The printout is there because Jane from the one airline in Australia that goes to Mexico, who he yells at on the phone a couple different times.
I love her. It's such a wild, unnecessary scene, their entire interaction, but like he's rude to her and she just fucking hangs up on him. You're not allowed to do that in customer service, but she just hangs up on him and refuses to take his call again.
Exactly.
It's remarkable.
Well, because it's one of like, she's one of the few women who's given like kind of something to do. Because okay, so we've got the Lisa, the police officer friend who shows up, who seems like she may have been a former girlfriend or something. We're not really told.
I think she's definitely into him.
Yes,
it doesn't have to be sexually, but I think it is.
Well,
but even if it's not,
everybody is. Well, everybody is, because there's the there's the hooker who's a hooker who he pays, to be with Lin Pao. There's Louise, who is the barmaid, who just straight up walks up to Frank in the hallway and says that she wants to do him, and he's like, no, I'm not really into that. And then she leans in to kiss him when his wife shows up, who was never technically established to be his wife before, in the one scene that we saw her talking to him on the phone.
Yeah.
And then you have Jane, who's the travel agent, who just berates him on the phone because he was being a piece of shit first.
Yeah. The only good character in the movie. I think the detective, what's her name? I forgot.
Lisa.
Lisa, she gets such a raw deal.
Yes.
There's this really emotional scene, or it wants to be an emotional scene. It's not really, but like where they're talking and she's like, now tell me the truth, Frank. Tell me the truth. Are you really doing these things? And he's like, no, I've always been straight. Like you know that. That's a lie. And she dies. She's dead because
Exactly.
of you, Frank. Because of you.
And she gets a really cool, like one of the few, or at least cool for the film, fight scenes while Frank is completely knocked out. But then she's not even given like the chance to finish the fight, because Frank, 5 minutes later, comes to, lights his shoes on fire to kick a guy 2 times.
Oh my god, I forgot about the shoes.
He lights his shoes on fire, kicks a guy, and then looks down and goes, "Oh shit!" And it's like, yeah, you're the one who lifted up your foot to set it on fucking fire. What do you expect?
This is actually just classic Frank, though. Like lighting his shoes on fire to solve a problem is the most true to Frank thing ever, because he then solves the problem and then is like, "Oh fuck, my shoes are on fire."
Yes.
That's the whole movie is, oh fuck, my shoes are on fire, and I'm lighting. I'm pouring acid on my feet in order to get the fire out, but oh no, now there's acid on my feet. Like that's the whole movie.
And while he's going, oh no, there's acid on my feet, that's when the pimp shows up again with like the next round of people, and has one of my favorite quotes in the movie, in which he goes, "Let's see how tough you are now, Mr. Has-Been hockey player."
Got him.
What?
Got him.
and then he goes and he sits in, like, by the trash cans. There's a really high up chair that makes it look like he's like a tennis umpire.
Yes, or a king on his throne of trash,
who's just keep on saying, "Get him, get him, get him," and like
you could help.
It's just like they have all these scenes that are manufacturing like fight scenes that makes no sense. Like we've mentioned, all the pimps goons, but the triad who got screwed over at the beginning keep on sending their own guys to fuck with Harry.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just, it doesn't make sense. And we mentioned Louise, who tries to make out with him in the hallway, and the wife shows up, and the wife she sees him, like they haven't actually kissed, like they're getting ready to kiss, and the wife storms off and says that she wants a divorce, and it's just like, no, I'm done with it. I'm done with all of this. And you're just like, wait, what happened? So you showed up here because he told you to show up. You thought he was going to kiss somebody, and now you're saying that you want to divorce him because he's never home. And his only response is, "But my life. I'm a nightclub owner."
He just doesn't seem like a man that's actually that dedicated to his nightclub.
Well, I mean, he blames his nightclub life, on like the shifting morals of it. Like, he owns the building. He doesn't also have to run it. That's his choice. That's his decision.
Just hire
to do so.
a manager. Like the wild thing to me is that, once again, we have to state that this nightclub is open the whole time. So like while everything is happening here, there are customers in the nightclub. Like there's a whole scene where one of the triad guys like fights him, and he suddenly is behind one of the bars fighting him.
He breaks one of the lights that was just fixed to knock the guy out, and hands it to Tom and says, "Hey, get this guy out of here and then fix this light."
Well, and there's this weird scene where like one of the bartenders is doing like a scene from Cocktail, and then suddenly his bar is invaded. It's so random.
It's this little redhead guy in glasses and like a shiny vest, and he's just literally flipping a bottle around his back like 3 or 4 times, and then the two guys fighting just wander into frame.
Yeah. And then no one in the bar is like, "Oh, this is weird." It's just like the weird thing is, like, I mean, maybe this is true to what the bar is. I don't see that many customers. Like, I know
No,
there are
no.
some, but like, it doesn't seem like the bar's doing very well.
Well, I mean, if you're going to a place that looks like it's an abandoned bank and has a giant banner outside above the door
Yeah.
that says construction underway, we're open.
Yeah. That
Are
has the
you
police raid it not once, but twice in the same night.
Which to go back to Dexter, he seems like the person who sees Frank the truest, because again, Frank is supposed to be the protagonist that we're supposed to side with, but he's cooking the books so that he can sell the place, to screw over this businessman. He's screwing over the triad and the Italians just because he wants extra money, and is constantly just like berating a whole bunch of people, even though he's supposed to be the good guy. And it's like, I don't know why he's supposed to be on our side. And Dexter has a point where he looks at him when they are trying to raid the place, and Frank decided to hide the heroin, cocaine, whatever it is, that he was going to fill up balloons with it and shove it down his throat. But as Dexter's leaving, he says, "You're a loser, Frank. You're always going to lose. It's in your blood. Nothing's going to change that."
Poor Frank. Oh wait, no, not poor Frank, because he's an asshole.
He's just a shit to everybody. Like they try to frame it as he's like a cool guy, and you're like,
Yeah.
no, you did all this crappy stuff. Like, he's constantly, I don't know if it's supposed to be, it's a runner through it. At times it feels like it's a gag, but he's trying to get a hold of his accountant who's out of town, who his accountant is the person who's helping him cook the books. And Frank's saying, hey, they want to see the ledger. I need the ledger that has everything fudged. And he can't get a hold of this guy, but he's constantly having to like run off and be like, oh, I'm sorry. And instead of like trying to fix a situation, he's like, no, I need that thing that would technically incriminate me and send me to jail in any other case.
Well, so there are two sets of books, right? Like, I think the books that he wants to get for the accountant are the cooked books. Like, they've got their real books, and they've got the ones they made up that and they showed to the guy. And so he's I don't know why he wouldn't keep those in his safe, but he isn't. They're with the accountant. And then, okay,
he can't keep it in his safe because there's the wad of $450,000 that's all $1,000 bills.
Okay, good. I was going to ask that question. It's $1,000 bills, and I wanted to check
bills.
like, are there $1,000 bills in Canada? And I think the answer is no. So
I don't think that was. First of all, it wouldn't be Canada because we're in Australia,
or not Canada, Australia. Yeah.
But it was like, it looked like American currency.
It did. It looked like US $1,000 bills.
And he has the $450,000 that's in the safe, but he also has that giant wad of straight dollar bills that he has on the inside breast of his jacket.
Yes. I don't know.
It should also be mentioned that everything that we're talking about right now is incredibly boring while it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're making this movie sound a little funnier and more interesting than it actually is, because it's just not. Like, okay, so I have a question for you. The accountant.
Yeah. Yes.
Did the accountant intentionally fuck him over? Or was it just an oops? So like, what the accountant does is
no. Yeah. Yes, I believe so, because the very last thing he says is "Good luck, Frank."
Yeah. I don't like the tone of this movie is so hard to read. That's what I thought too. So the accountant says, like, I've been trying to get a hold of you all night. I can't help you, but I've got a guy that's going to help you. I've told you everything. I've told
him everything about the situation.
Yeah. He says he's there now.
Doing that. Yeah. As he's doing that, he opens the door to where, because Lin Pao was already in the office when he's finally able to, get a hold of him. And Mr. Lau, who is Mr. Lin Pao's accountant, has a gun that's pointed at Frank. Now, the gun's not important at all because, again, this is a fight movie. So this guy who's the accountant, who's wearing a terrible wig and also has a crazy goatee that's going on, which is very distracting every time you see him. I don't know if it's real or fake, but it's very confusing. He's had a cane for most of the movie, and he reveals that it's actually a cane sword. And so they have a cane sword versus hockey stick fight.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he, of course, knows how to do the flippies and the punchies, too, because all accountants, actually. The little known fact, all accountants have to go through martial arts training.
Did you have to do that before you get your license, before you become like a certified, you know.
Yeah, it's part of the CPA exam. You got to
Okay, I wondered about that.
Yeah, you got to take a tax test, a finance test, and then a karate test. Yeah.
Now, depending upon the region that you're in, is it strictly like karate, or is there some places that maybe have judo or aikido and taekwondo? If you're in Israel to become an accountant, do you have to take the Krav Maga classes, or is it strictly karate?
I think every region has their own rules and regulations around it. You'd have to check with those regions. So I'm not 100% sure. For me, it was just plain old karate.
I know. I was just curious if you happen to know.
No, I haven't researched it around the world. I mean, in Australia, they're probably a little more loose about it. It's like as long as you can do a flippy and a kicky, you're good. That's the
That's it.
test.
That's
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
Do they actually test them to see if they can do it, or is it just like a little checkbox? Can you do a kicky?
Well,
Mark
I mean,
yes or no.
yeah, that you self-attest, but they could audit you at any moment, and then like they're going to show up at your place of work and be like, do a kicky, and if you can't, well, you're fucked.
Now, who would be the people who are doing that? Is it like the finance board that's in charge of that, or is like whatever the? Well, I mean, because they've got different cities, so I don't know if they have a karate board.
Yeah, look, I don't even know if I'm allowed to tell you this, but there's actually like a secret cabal of accountants that run the whole industry, and I mean, look, I could get killed for telling you this right now, but
I'm inclined not to believe you just because you use the word cabal.
What? That's a totally legit name for a secret accountant organization.
That sounds like somebody who wants you to believe that they know what an accountant organization is. I mean, there's got to be more of like an account or finance term, but I don't think they're going to say cabal.
Isn't this a Ben Affleck movie in which he's actually a spy or something? I don't remember. The Accountant. Am I making this up?
I'm pretty. Wait, I guess they technically have it, but isn't he like on the spectrum in that movie?
Yes.
That's all I remember is that he's an accountant, but he's actually an assassin.
Yeah.
And he's on the spectrum. And when somebody was like, we need somebody who fits all these things, they said Ben Affleck.
Of course, Ben Affleck. I'm sure it's a very, very
tastefully done film.
Yes.
Is that what you're going to say?
Yes, a very tastefully done depiction of a person on the spectrum. Of course.
As tastefully done as the trailer for that new Mark Wahlberg movie.
Yeah.
Not Infinite, the other one.
I don't even know what you're talking about, but Mark Wahlberg, tasteful? Yes, of course.
Yeah, the one where his son is gay and commits suicide, so he goes around the country wanting to raise awareness, but keeps on like he's on his trip that he's taking, the memory of his son
Wow.
is talking to him and everything. And so like you're watching, I know it's supposed to be an inspirational movie, but if you watch it through like the lens of the trailer, it's like, well, I didn't fully understand when my son was alive, but now I'm going to go and raise his story. But really it's technically bringing attention to me and what a great father I am for bringing attention to my son who died.
Wow. This is wild.
Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah.
And if you're really confused about our Mark Wahlberg talk, then you can go way back to 2016 at our very first episode of Phantom Zoned, in which we covered The Happening.
One of the greatest movies of all time. Just putting that out there.
But I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher. That's, you know what? Mark Wahlberg's probably a nice individual.
Sure,
but,
I'm sure he's great.
A couple weeks before everything got closed down by the pandemic, my wife and I were like, you know what? This place has been here for a year. We might as well try it. Not a single person has told us anything about Wahlburgers.
You went to Wahlburgers.
We went to a Wahlburgers because it's literally like 7 minutes from where we live. Have you been to one or seen one? I haven't watched the show or anything, so I didn't know what to expect. I don't know if all the Wahlburgers are the same.
They have to be.
But when we walked in, so they do have like a bar area because, of course, it's Wahlburgers. You're going to expect that they're going to have a bar area. But we were sat off to the side, and the chairs basically felt like plastic deck chairs that you would be sitting in. They brought our drinks right away in a to-go cup. They had
being sensitive to your time.
No, I understand. It's Wahlburgers. You don't want to stay too long. They gave us a menu, and for some reason they were out of half the menu. we weren't given an explanation. We were just told that they didn't have several things that were on the menu, and that's why there were X's through them.
Marky
And,
Mark was supposed to make a delivery, but he got distracted.
So my wife got a burger, and my stomach was sensitive that day. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to get a salad. I know that doesn't sound like what you're going to do at Wahlburgers, but let's try it. This way we're at least trying something. The salad was just like basic leafy greens, a diced carrot, blue cheese crumbles, and then they'd literally taken a hamburger that they had cooked and chopped it up into a couple pieces and put on there. And they didn't bring me a bowl or anything. It's like it was a paper like bowl plate.
Look,
Is the best way to describe it.
I want to be sensitive to your stomach issues, but you went to Wahlburgers and ordered a salad. I feel like this is on you.
Well, I know, but seeing it, like I like they cooked the hamburger and they just chopped it up and put it on the salad and was like, here you go.
I can't just imagine the look on Mark Wahlberg's face if you were like interviewing him and told him that you went to his burger place,
Hey,
but I got the salad.
Hey, Mark, you've heard of Fuddruckers, right?
Uh-huh.
So here's my question for you. Why is your place underneath Fuddruckers on the quality scale? In both in terms of the food that you've made and like the design of the place that you have set up. Like that's what you think of. Like if somebody opened a Fuddruckers and let it decay for like a year, that's basically what the inside of this Wahlburgers was. And that's why I wonder if like they're all the same or like maybe Kansas City just got the shaft, but like I hadn't seen anything about it. So I was expecting, since they had the TV show and they had the money behind it, that it was going to be a little bit, I don't know, nicer.
Didn't Fuddruckers go out of business?
They did, and they were replaced by Wahlburgers at every location.
That's hilarious.
It's basically the same quality. Like Fuddruckers might be better.
It's got to be.
And Fuddruckers was a place where they literally had a station where you could pump your own cheese onto your hamburger.
I mean, the entire point of Fuddruckers as an establishment is so 11-year-old children can get away with saying fucker. Like that's the entire reason it exists.
The entire point of Fuddruckers is to say, hey, look, we grilled a fucking sandwich for you. You make the rest of it.
You fucker. Exactly. Man,
we have
gone way off this movie. But that's because it's not fun to talk about.
The whole reason why I wanted to bring up Wahlburgers is because we're talking about people who are running what should be a successful business into the ground.
Yes. Yeah. So at the end of this movie, okay.
Yes. Okay. So to wrap it up, so we got to the big fight, which I guess again, this is a film that's manufacturing fights because the lead actor is somebody who's known for fighting. But you have it between the accountant who knows how to do karate and everything. And the second that's done, you have Dexter and the DEA guys have swarmed onto the scene. You've got the triad guys who have swarmed onto the scene and have taken Louise hostage. You have the pimp who is back once again with his guys, and everyone starts shooting at each other.
Yeah.
Most of them at point blank range, and Frank misses about 75% of them. Like the majority of the people who die in the final gunfight are because one of the other factions shot them.
Yes.
While this is going on, you find out that Tom isn't, a bad guy at all. And he's totally on Frank's side, has gone outside to grab a brown paper bag that has the most oversized shotgun ever.
It's ridiculous.
And taken his hair out of a ponytail, so it's really scraggly all over the place. And it turns out the turncoat who's been working with Dexter the whole time is Harry.
How could you, Harry? How could you, Harry? And he tries to fucking shoot Frank. He tries to shoot his friend.
Exactly. He points a gun at him only so he can get shot by Dexter, only so he can magically pop back up about 2 minutes later to get the final shot in.
Yeah. He's got, he's got to do it. He's got to protect his old buddy.
It's just like the way it's done is just so dumb, and like you don't care. Like there's blood that's flying all over the place, and it should look cool.
It's some of the most boring shootouts like I've ever seen. Like it's
It,
just dull, and like you can tell the sound effects are all cheap. None of the guns sound like guns at all. They sound like sometimes they're like lasers. It's really bad.
it's it's a film that you've had a whole bunch of karate fights in, but it ends up in a giant shootout.
I still don't understand how bad the DEA is at their jobs in this
Yes.
movie. So, okay, earlier in the movie, they come in, they have a warrant, and Frank runs into his bank safe office. They put a C4 charge
Yes.
on his door,
Uh-huh.
get inside, and he's just standing there with headphones on. It's like, oh, sorry, I didn't hear you. They look around, and then they just leave because they didn't find anything. You've blown his door open, and now you're just going to leave? And so like, oh, we didn't find anything, so we're just going to go. But then they rush back in like 10 minutes later.
Well,
Why did you leave?
Because they had to get more guns.
Obviously.
And that's when he decided, you know what, fuck it, we're going. Because I think he even makes a comment where he's like, we're just going in and we're taking this guy down, regardless. And like the funny thing about Harry is like when you find out that he's the turncoat, he gets shot, pointing the gun at Frank, gets shot by somebody else.
Well, doesn't he get stabbed? I think he gets stabbed.
Oh yeah, sorry. He gets
the butterfly knife.
Yeah, he gets stabbed by the butterfly knife while in an altercation with Frank, and Frank tells Tom, to get him to a hospital. So when Frank sees Harry at the very climax of the film with a gun, he's essentially left the hospital to come back to the nightclub because he's wrapped up around the waist with where he was stabbed, and then he gets shot, but then is still alive at the end of the movie.
He's
but
fine.
the thing that pissed me off the most about this movie, you have a shit ton of people who've died throughout this entire night. Mm-hmm. Harry's fucked over people. Frank has just been an asshole the whole time. His wife was going to leave him because he almost kissed somebody. And, the wife comes over to him and is like, oh, I didn't, realize everything that was going on. Well, maybe this is maybe this is a blessing in disguise. And you're like, what? And he's like, what? And she's like, yeah, I want to be a part of things with you. I want to help. I want to help you out. I want to give this a chance. I think we can make a go of this. And you're like, wait. This guy fucked over the triad, fucked over the mob, was cooking the books so that he could get the money to leave with you. And just now you're coming to the realization of, oh, I could have helped run this place with you.
Yeah. Well,
no one had to die.
Yeah, they're just going to stay now. They're just going to stay and just be club owners. And that's the end of the movie. Hooray. We've all learned an important lesson today, which is don't fuck people over, but there are no consequences.
And they embrace and it freeze frames at the end.
Oh my God. Under the gun. Can I so I need to tell you.
Yes.
And the people listening, you sent me a list of movies and said, watch all the trailers for these movies and pick one. And this is the one I picked. However, I didn't realize that Tubi had its own like very easy to see trailer attached to the movie. So I just went to YouTube and I just typed in the names of all these movies and watched the trailers on YouTube. And there is a movie called Under the Gun that came out in 1988 starring Sam Jones and Vanessa Williams that is about a police officer and a lawyer teaming up to fight crime in LA. And that's the movie I thought we were going to be doing an episode on. And then when I sat down to watch it, I ended up watching this. But I was really confused because I was waiting for Vanessa Williams to show up. But did not happen. So
no, I apologize for that because that's why I specifically was trying to tell you, hey, they're all on Tubi. Yeah. Make sure to watch the trailers, as in like that you would go on to Tubi to watch all the trailers.
No. I will say, after I'd watched the trailer, you sent me that information about how it was all filmed in a power plant in Australia. And having watched this LA action movie where they're driving around LA, I was like, how the fuck did they do that around a power plant? I'm really impressed. But no, just the wrong movie. I I feel like this is probably a better movie. Under the 90, no, the 88 Under the Gun, probably better. With Vanessa Williams and Sam Jones in it, probably better.
So you went in expecting one thing, and what you got was more disappointing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Kind of like when I went to Wahlburgers.
Well, I mean, the funny thing is, if you look at the posters for these two movies, like one of them looks like a poster of a real movie. There's Sam Jones standing there and he's got a shotgun in his hand. There's an explosion in the bathroom bathroom back of the thing, and then out of the explosion comes beautiful Vanessa Williams' head looking concerned. It looks like a real movie poster. And then you look at the poster for Under the Gun, and it looks like someone threw this together in Photoshop in like 30 seconds.
Yes, yes. I mean that. I don't know what to say.
In fact, oh my god, please look at the poster and open it. Open the poster. It is so clearly just they photoshopped him and they cut around his hair and pasted him on top of another background. Like
Poor
holy
Flash.
shit.
Poor Flash.
No, I'm talking about the Wonder we watched.
Oh,
This Under the Gun.
Okay, Under the Gun has some amazing posters. If you're on IMDb,
yeah, I'm talking about like the main one. It's so clearly a Photoshop. Oh my god.
Well, no, but I mean, it's technically the best out of all the ones that they have on offer. Because, like I said, the one that they have for, I'm not sure if it's Spanish or German cover, but one of the ones that says Iron Fist and then Under the Gun underneath that has Harry as the big person who's on the front.
Yeah,
and like,
why?
You can't even make out, our Frank on it. And then they've got another one where he's just badly photoshopped in every single
he is so
poster.
badly photoshopped. Oh my god!
Like it's basically I Am Wrath level a poster work here.
Hey, why the fuck is the tagline of this movie "You can't outrun a bullet"?
It's just a factual statement.
I mean, true. I'm not questioning the legitimacy of the statement. I just why?
Well, I mean, if we're going to be making questions such as this, I think that means that it's time for us to vote now.
Okay.
Of course, there's only two options here, and we set it up at the very beginning that if a film is, if it's not guilty, what we're saying is that we think that it's a movie that you should watch. It might not be the greatest film in the world, but we think that there's going to be entertainment value. There's going to be something that you're going to be able to pull from it. You're going to be able to watch it with friends, maybe have a few drinks, but you're going to enjoy it. It might be great. Some of them are going to be great, but not guilty means that we want people to watch it. Guilty means that we want the film to be gone forever. We don't want it to hurt people. We don't want it to waste your time.
Yes.
You don't want to bother with that. So we want to make sure that you understand that distinction.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, Scott, what are you going to vote?
Well, you know how much I love intentionally voting not guilty for something I know you hate just to annoy you. However, I can't do that on this movie because I legitimately just did not enjoy it. It's the worst cardinal sin of these type of movies is that they're just not that very interesting. And it just never got to a point where it was hilarious how bad it was. I mean, I certainly had a lot of fun talking about it with you, but I had way more fun talking about it than I did actually having to sit down and watch the movie. So no, it's guilty. This is a terrible, terrible, terrible movie that I just don't think anyone should spend the time on.
There's a version of this movie that's fun and great. And if you gave Scott and I, like a day to sit down and go through our heads, we could probably easily find, 2 to 3 movies of that ilk to suggest to you. The difference with this one is when they make weird decisions, it's not fun because the way that it's delivered is boring. Basically, it's rudimentary. You don't really care. The character quirks that should be there aren't. Like everybody's completely flat. Again, there was a reason why I mentioned the meeting of Peter Lindsay and Richard Norton in Mr. Nice Guy. Like watch that. Seriously, go and find that and then compare that to the short little quote unquote trailer on Tubi for this movie. There's so much more engaged in that and it doesn't make any sense. So I have to vote guilty as well, just because there is some fun weirdness about this movie, but you get more enjoyment out of this movie talking about it with people
Oh,
and
definitely.
scratching your head than actually actively watching and enjoying it when you're in the moment.
Yeah,
So
because the thing about watching a movie is you like it's an hour and a half and you have to like watch it all. You can't just like turn it off, which I wanted to do several times.
and with it being on Tubi, you do have the commercials. So
Yeah, I mean, I did appreciate the commercials because they gave me just enough time to like jot down my terrible like what the fuck is going on in this movie notes. But yeah, it just extended the terrible process even further.
that's the way it goes. But I mean, I feel a little bit sad that our first film back, we're shooting off like this.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted it to be a happening level masterpiece, which is just the best movie ever. And just reiterate that once again that The Happening is genius, and everyone should watch that movie. Watch The Happening again instead of this movie.
Now we do have a couple of films, that we're looking at to do next, which I think we're gonna try to swing for the fences and find something that's a bit weirder, more over the top, more extreme. What do you think about that, Scott?
I love it. I love extreme. I love weird. I love over the top. I love under the top. Let's do it.
Over the top, under the gun,
Around the top is
under the
yeah.
sheets. He's never in a bed. So
No, he's weirdly like as much as they try to like put him with women in this movie, he's like weirdly asexual. Like he never actually does anything or initiates anything with any of them. It's always them trying to initiate stuff with him and getting interrupted.
the most action he gets is when the guy punches him in the nuts.
There you go. There you go. Good old
That's
nut
it.
punch.
You gotta have it. You gotta
Yeah,
have it.
gotta.
But I mean, this is we're shaking off the cobwebs here.
Oh yeah.
We're getting it out. So it's gonna be we've got some choices that we're gonna make in the future, and we want to hear from you guys. So definitely make sure to comment and let us know what you think about the episode. We want to hear from you guys. We want to hear what types of movies you guys want.
Yeah.
We're going to be bringing a little bit everything. I think we're going to be bringing in some guests and stuff like that. But Scott, where can everybody find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at ScottDaily85, and that's mostly where I hang out. I mean, you can go to doofmedia.com and check out all of our different shows, of which this is a part of. We haven't quite figured out the whole structure of where this is going to be and how it's going to be. I think the plan is to do it once a month, but we haven't quite figured out that structure yet. But we will definitely let you folks know.
And if you guys want, more than that, then maybe we can work something out. Maybe we can, find something special to do for the people.
I mean, if there's one thing the world has an infinite amount of, it's terrible, terrible movies.
And we'll see just how much of Scott's patience we can break down.
Yeah, I mean, I was broken once, and I'm ready to be broken again. So let's do it.
There's at least 4 or 5 other Barbarian Brother movies out there.
Oh my god, damn it!
I'll serenade you with a Ruby Dawn once we get off mic.
Yes.
You can find me on Twitter at Adrian Torres. I also have another podcast that's called Horrorversary. It's been off for a couple months, but it's getting ready to come over again. So if you're somebody who likes celebrating horror movies that are celebrating anniversaries, that's the show that you got right there. It's fun getting back in this rhythm with you, man. I'm sad that it wasn't a more exciting movie, but hey, I mean, you got to go through some of these. Sometimes they can't all be a blood match.
They can't all be a Senorita Justice,
Yeah, there's very little that I remember from that one.
I just remember being very angry with that movie.
Very angry, a guy trapped in a trunk, and a sex scene that feels like it was in a janitor's closet.
See, you remember more than you thought. There you go.
But I mean, that's it. That's it. I remember more of Blood Match.
See, I don't remember anything of that movie.
Oh, but maybe this will jog your memory. I'm Brick Bardo.
Sadly, no. I got nothing.
That was Blood Match is famously the one where Tom Matthews, who most people would know from God, why am I like Friday the 13th Part 6?
Wow.
Because he's great in that, and then he came back for the Friday the 13th video game. But he's the lead in this, and he kidnaps 4 people who were involved in the murder of his brother, and forces all of them to fight him kickboxing style in a ring to the death if they won't let him know what their part was in their brother's death.
Like some sort of blood match.
Yep. And then after he fights and defeats the last person, he reveals the fact that he doesn't have a brother, and that the person that they killed, who he's trying to get everybody to confess that they killed, is actually him.
How do you solve a murder when the victim is you? Blood match.
No, that doesn't.
Blood match. That was a real tagline for a movie. I don't know if you remember.
I believe it, but
it was a movie where
was it Lindsay Lohan's movie?
I don't know. It's a movie where a guy gets murdered, and he's not dead yet. He's just in a coma, but he's a ghost, and he's trying to solve his murder as a ghost before his body dies.
Oh God. Oh. But he doesn't realize he's a ghost.
No, not
because
yet.
It's Justin Chatwin who was in the Dragon Ball Z movie, and the film is written and directed by David Goyer.
How the fuck did you do that? That's what?
But what's it called?
I don't know.
I feel bad that I'm having to grab my phone now, but I know exactly what it is, because David Goyer was directing it after he had done a couple of the Batman movies, had written a couple of the Batman movies, and so it was his big chance to be like, hey, I'm going to direct a film then, and he hasn't really directed anything since.
Yeah, I know exactly. I think, is it, no, what is it?
The Invisible.
The Invisible, yeah. Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
2007, David S. Goyer directed it, based on a book.
How do you solve a murder when the victim is you? Is one of the taglines. I was right about that.
It was when you mentioned that the person wasn't dead, he was in a coma, but he was a ghost. And because the whole movie, you don't know that he's actually a ghost until like the last 5 minutes. And like the movie's just giving you a giant middle finger, which is very much akin to the end of the Tomorrow War.
What a transition. Oh my God.
Because I watched it, because when I was trying to watch this movie was on a Monday, which was the day after 4th of July. So I had it off, but I had errands that I had to run throughout the day. So I watched half of Under the Gun, and then my wife was coming home and says, just wait and finish it later, because we've got to watch this. And so then I watched the Tomorrow War, and then had to go back and watch this. And I was already angry from the end of the Tomorrow War. And then the second half of this movie made me even angrier.
The Tomorrow War is one of the dumbest movies I've ever seen. It's like, here's the thing that frustrated me about that movie. And I talked about this on an earlier podcast briefly, but I think some of the emotional moments in the movie work, like the daughter-son or the daughter-father stuff works. But the entire premise of the movie is so fucking absurd that I could just never get on board for any of it.
Yeah,
ever.
well, I mean, part of it is, God, what's it called? The famous scene from Thank You for Smoking, where they're making the comment about, well, that doesn't make any sense. How do you do that? And they go, oh yeah, we just write a simple line in there where you go, oh, thank goodness we created the whatever device. and that's what this movie is because somebody even says, oh, well, then why don't you go back in time and stop this part from it? And they're like, well, that's not how it works, because time is a river, and it just keeps moving. And you're like, no, that's not what this is.
Let me tell you something I know 100% would happen if a bunch of people from the future showed up and said, hey, there's a war in the future. Will you come help us fight it?
Bang, bang, bang.
Everyone would be like, no, go the fuck away. Why would we ever agree to that? That's ridiculous.
Scott.
Huh.
Climate change.
It's climate change. It's climate change.
Volcanoes.
But the fucking volcano setup. I actually called it. I was like, this movie is going to make fucking Volcano Kid matter at some point. And I was right.
So Scott, guilty or not guilty on this wonderful episode of Phantom Zone for the Tomorrow War?
The Tomorrow War. See, I'm actually going to say not guilty because I
Oh
think that is
wow.
I think
Oh
that is
wow.
so stupid it's fun because I was having a really great time like scratching my head at this movie. And I think
You
like
know what I learned, Scott? You're the problem. You're the problem with them not understanding what they need to do with Chris Pratt and movies. Because like I like Chris Pratt, but the problem that we've had, and I was thinking about this earlier today, is ever since he was in Guardians of the Galaxy, they give him all these big tentpole parts to
sure.
play, you know, the stoic hero. But what they don't understand is the reason that people liked him in Guardians of the Galaxy is because everybody calls Quill out on that he's not good at that. That he's a kid, you know, who grew up in part of the 80s and like watching those action movies and everything before he got whisked off to fucking space and then was raised in space. And so he puts on the airs of trying to be this hero and this, you know, cool vagabond. And then everybody takes the piss out of him around it. So then when they try to put him in a movie where no characters do that, he doesn't work in the role.
Yeah, he doesn't work as like he got buff and they tried to just make him a straight action star and it doesn't work. Like it's interesting like I think Krasinski can pull it off. John Krasinski can pull off the straight action star thing, but I don't think Chris Pratt can.
Yeah, I mean, this is a movie in which they're like, "Hey, we need you to stick out your arm, but make sure to take your shirt off first."
Yeah, of course. Of course.
But you're putting something on my wrist. No. Just take off your shirt for a second. We're from the future. This is how you do things in the
Why
future.
did we agree to this? If let's say hypothetically, if was all true and we knew that in 30 years from now a bunch of aliens were going to come and we were going to have to fight them, why would we send our people to
Mm-hmm.
fight them in the future and not just prepare for it in the past? What? That doesn't make any sense.
I think the thing that's really disappointing is that we find out that 30 years from now, SpaceX hasn't gone anywhere.
Yeah, it's a
I mean,
bummer.
we there were promises, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
when am I going to get to drive a Cybertruck on the moon?
Yeah, if I'm not fucking on Mars by 2051, I'm going to be pissed.
Whoa, Scott. I mean, you can go to Mars. You don't have to be fucking on Mars. I
I'm
mean, let's just
what the
go
hell
and
is the point of
colonize
going
it.
to Mars if we can't fuck on it? That's the whole point.
Okay, you do make a good point. I mean, after all, Mars needs moms.
And that's going to do it for us this month.
It's good to be back, everybody.
Oh, that was fun.
We'll see you next time.